Hey everyone, it's Kristen, and today I wanted to do a little video on how to go about adding in some test cases and running debugger on your code to help you get your projects done over the weekend and help you understand a little bit more about how to implement code. So let's see here. I have taken my original function called keep trucking, which I created in my last video if you were able to watch it. And I've made a couple of little additions here. So the first thing I want to show you is that I have taken this and put it into the Cloud9. I have taken my function and I have made sure that there is a main and that there is an include IOStream and a using namespace. So make sure that your includes and your main are together with your program. Now let's take a look at the main here for a second. Notice that I have gone in here and I've done a couple of things. The first thing that I have done is that I have declared a variable called gas and a variable called mph. Now notice the format that I'm doing here, where the next thing I'm doing is I'm asking the user through a cout statement to enter and input a value for gas. So we're initializing gas by getting user defined input. And we're doing the same thing here for the miles per hour. This is one way that you could do it. Another way that you could do it is to put in initial values yourself. So if you wanted to test initial values, you could declare it initialize in the same statement, like this. The way I'm doing it here allows us to get some flexibility every time we run it. We can put in different amounts every time and test different scenarios because of this. Okay, so let's look at our functioning here and take a look at what we've got going on here. So a couple of things that we've changed since we ran our last code in the last video is that we wanted to make sure that this doesn't continuously loop. And if you watched the last video, I talked about flags. So here I've set up flags with this while loop. And notice that here I've added an additional flag in the else statement. So say someone was to input over 10 gallons of gas into this function, what would happen is that without this comment here, we would never exit this loop because, one, gas is always going to be over 10. So the first if statement is going to be jumped over continuously by the program and keep us inside of this loop forever. An example of this, if we run this, would look like this. Let me turn debugger off here. We're going to run debugger here in a second. So let me say I put in 12 gallons of gas and 35 miles an hour. Uh-oh. Looks like we're stuck in an infinite loop that's going to continuously keep printing because we don't have a way to exit that while loop. So that's why making sure that your flags or your Boolean conditional argument is always met in some way. You want to make sure that it's held to be true until proven false. So here when we use the flag in this condition, we are proving the statement false eventually. So if someone was to put in over 10 gallons of gas, we would break this loop. So if I was to run this again, and I was to put in 12 gallons of gas, notice that we've exited our program immediately because the flag was set to false. We came back up here, and when we checked our while loop condition at the beginning of the loop again on the second iteration, we realized that our condition, our Boolean condition argument, has been held to be false now. It's been broken by this flag, and that's why our program terminated. So let's talk about how to set up several different ways of doing test cases. So if I was not using couts and cns to gather information, another way that I could do this would be to initialize these variables in some ways. So let's say we want to do gas equal 10. Actually, let's do it smaller. Gas equal 5, and miles per hour is 35. Okay? So let's run our program now using Debugger, and we're going to see what happens here. So notice that I've set a breakpoint here. This is the first thing about Debugger is that Debugger is used by using the debug mode. You will have to click the green icon on your blue bash terminal, and you will have to set a breakpoint, which is the little red dot here, to the left of your line number. What the breakpoint does is I want you to think of it kind of like a stop sign in your code. And the code is going to compile kind of like a car driving down a street. And if it sees a stop sign while in debug mode, it's going to be forced to stop and check what's going on step by step or street by street instead of being on a highway and going continuously. So here, notice that we have a couple of local variables here. Our Boolean flag is held to be true. Our gas is currently 5 because we set that down here at the bottom of the program. And our miles per hour is also 35 because of our initialization and declaration. So if we go up here, we can step over the program and it will literally go line by line and check what's going on. So notice that it's checking to see if gas is less than or equal to 10. That is true, so we go into our if statement. It's checking to see if the gas has reached 0, but it hasn't because we just started our program. And so here it's checking to see if the gas is less than or 10, less than or equal to 10, and also greater than 30. Well, we met those conditions, so we're going to do a cout statement here for keep trucking, and we're also going to tell the user how many gallons of gas they have. Now notice something here. This is something that I just caught when I was looking at this. We are decrementing gas after printing the gallons. So every turn we should probably actually decrement gas before, because the reason why is because we want to tell them, okay, at the end of this turn you have this many left. So that's one thing that we can change just from running Debugger. Okay, so we're going to keep stepping through, and here notice that gas is getting decremented again and telling us how many we have. And we're going to keep doing this until our gas reaches 0. Gas is now 1. And we're on our last pass. Okay. So gas has now reached 0. Our miles per hour is still 35 and our flag is still true. However, watch what happens next. We're going to check to see if gas is 0. Uh-oh, it looks like we have reached the end of our tank of gas. So we're going to do a cout statement. Now we're going to set the flag here to false. Now this is really important to think about. When I set up if-else-if conditions, I really like to try and put the last case scenario in my first if statement, so that if you're thinking about terminating your program or you're thinking about what's going to happen at the end results, think about that first when you're building your if-else-if statements. That's really useful because it's the first thing that gets checked for, and if it's not true, it's going to get skipped over and the rest of the program will execute. So here the flag has been set to false. We can see over here at the side that it is now false. And our Boolean condition is going to be false because the flag is now not true. And so you can see here that it goes down and exits the program. Okay, so a couple of other ways that we could do a declaration for test cases. Say we just kept our miles per hour and gas as variables to be passed into our function. Notice that we're declaring them in main. We're adding just the name of the variables into keep trucking because they are in the scope of main, and we are passing them up to the void keep trucking function to be used. Well, one thing we could do is we could, instead of declaring the variables, we could actually just say a number into keep trucking, and it would work just as well. So let's see here what happens. We're going to turn debugger off here and run again. Notice that we have the same output based on whether we use direct variables, direct numbers going into our keep trucking function, or whether we use the keep trucking function with variable names that we're passing in. As long as we have set these variables equal to something, right, we can do this. And that is pretty much the gist of how to do test cases. You can run multiple test cases here. Say you wanted to update the values for these two functions. What you could do is you could initialize gas through a cout statement. Or actually, let's just keep it that way. We're going to go back and keep it that way. And the first time we call keep trucking, we're going to pass in gas in miles per hour. But notice on the second time we call keep trucking, we're going to put in different variables. So let's run this and see what happens. So notice that we actually have two different outputs here. We're doing this program twice because we're calling the function twice. Let me actually put it, we're going to add an extra line in here to make it easier to read. Okay, so here we've gone through a lot of gas, and here we've only gone through a little bit of gas. And this is a good way to test your program, test your functions. You can try it in multiple ways, as long as you're making sure that you're passing your variables correctly and keeping a good eye on your while condition to make sure that you're not going to set yourself up for an infinite loop. Okay, I hope that that was instructional, guys. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys next time.